Jin-Soo Park never thought he would end up in a galactic prison. One moment he was doing his job as an aerospace engineer at the Nexus 7 spaceport, and the next, 4 heavily armored security officers were dragging him away. "But I was just fixing your docking system," Jin-Soo protested as they shoved him into the transport vehicle. It was going to explode if someone didn't repair it. The lead officer, a creature with blue scales and 3 eyes, made a gurgling sound. Unauthorized tampering with critical systems is a Class 5 offense. You will wait in detention until trial. The detention center looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. Walls made of some transparent material that hummed with energy, floors that seemed to absorb sound, and inmates of every shape and size Jin-Soo could imagine. He'd seen plenty of aliens during his month at the spaceport, but never this many in one place. A guard with tentacles instead of arms pushed him into cell block 7. "Human goes here," it announced to no one in particular. 12 standard mass units, carbon-based, no natural weapons. Jin-Soo stumbled into his cell, which already held 15 other prisoners. The force field closed behind him with a soft buzz. He looked around, taking in his new surroundings. The cell was large but crowded, with simple metal benches along the walls and a single water dispenser in the corner. Most of the inmates ignored him, busy with their own conversations or activities. But a group of 4 massive creatures in the far corner turned to stare. They were easily twice Jin-Soo's height, with gray skin that looked like rock and 4 muscular arms each. Their small eyes focused on him with predatory interest. "Look what walked in," the largest one rumbled. His voice sounded like gravel in a blender. "Never seen one of these before." Jin-Soo straightened his back and walked to an empty spot on a bench, trying not to show any fear. He'd learned during his time at the spaceport that many alien species could sense fear through pheromones or other biological signals humans didn't even know they were broadcasting. "Human," one of the other gray aliens said. "I heard about them. Soft skin, no claws, break easily." They laughed, a sound like rocks tumbling down a mountain. Jin-Soo noticed other inmates quickly moving away from the gray creatures, giving them plenty of space. Clearly, these were the ones in charge here. A bell chimed, and a slot in the wall opened, dispensing food cubes onto a tray. Jin-Soo watched as the aliens lined up to collect their portions. He joined the queue, noting how the gray creatures simply pushed others aside to get to the front. When Jin-Soo finally reached the dispenser, he received a small protein cube and a cup of what looked like blue jelly. He turned to find a place to eat, but the largest gray alien stepped in front of him. "Give," the creature demanded, holding out one of his 4 hands. Jin-Soo looked up at the towering alien. "This is my food ration. Was your food ration. Now is mine." The other gray aliens moved closer, forming a semicircle around Jin-Soo. He could feel the eyes of every other inmate on him, waiting to see what would happen. This was a test, he realized. How he responded would determine his place in the cell block hierarchy. Jin-Soo considered his options. He could fight. He'd had combat training back on Earth, but these creatures outweighed him by at least 3 times. He could submit and give up his food, but that would mark him as weak for the rest of his stay. Or, actually, Jin-Soo said calmly, "I was hoping we could share. I'm new here and could use some friends." The gray aliens looked at each other, confused. By this response, they'd expected either fight or flight, not diplomacy. "Share?" the leader repeated, as if the word was foreign to him. "Yes. Where I come from, sharing food is how we make allies. I'm Jin-Soo, by the way." The gray alien studied him for a long moment. "I am Takanur. We are Grexians." He paused, then added, "We do not share." With surprising speed for such a large creature, Takanur snatched the food cube from Jin-Soo's hand. The other Grexians laughed and returned to their corner, already dividing up the stolen meal. Jin-Soo sat down on his bench, still holding the cup of blue jelly. Other inmates watched him with a mixture of pity and curiosity. He'd lost his food, but he'd also gathered valuable information. These Grexians ruled through physical intimidation, not intelligence. They were predictable, and predictable opponents, Jin Su knew, were the easiest to defeat. As night fell in the detention center, Jin Su lay on his bench and planned. The Grexians thought they'd established dominance, but they had no idea what humans were capable of. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, he would begin to show them exactly why humans had earned their place among the stars. The next morning, Jin Su woke to the sound of heavy footsteps. The Grexians were already awake, doing what looked like exercises in their corner of the cell. Their gray muscles bulged as they lifted chunks of metal torn from the benches. "Morning food comes soon," whispered a small furry alien next to Jin Su. "Stay back. Grexians take first." The bell chimed, and the food slot opened. True to the warning, Takanur and his gang pushed everyone aside, grabbing the largest portions. When Jin Su finally reached the dispenser, only crumbs remained. "Human hungry," Takanur called out, waving Jin Su's portion in the air. "Maybe human should be faster." Jin Su's stomach growled, but he kept his face neutral. "Thank you for the advice," he replied politely, which seemed to confuse the Grexians more than anger would have. Throughout the day, the Grexians continued their campaign. When Jin Su tried to use the exercise area, they blocked his path. When he attempted to get water, they stood in front of the dispenser. Each time, Jin Su calmly found another activity or simply waited. "Why you not fight?" asked the furry alien, whose name was Pip. "Why you not angry?" "Because they want me to fight," Jin Su explained. "They're testing my reactions." The Grexians grew bolder. During the afternoon rest period, one of them accidentally knocked Jin Su off his bench. He hit the floor hard but rolled smoothly to his feet. "Oops," the Grexian said with fake concern. "Human very clumsy." Jin Su dusted himself off. "Yes, gravity here is different from Earth. I'm still adjusting." This response clearly frustrated the bullies. They wanted fear or anger, not calm acceptance. As evening approached, Takanur decided to escalate. He cornered Jin Su near the waste disposal unit, all four arms spread wide to block escape. "Human thinks he's smart," Takanur growled. "Human thinks he better than Grexian." "I don't think I'm better than anyone," Jin Su replied. "We're all just trying to survive here." Takanur's face twisted in confusion, then anger. He reached out with one massive hand, intending to grab Jin Su by the throat. What happened next surprised everyone. Jin Su didn't dodge or fight. Instead, he simply stepped forward into Takanur's reach and gently placed his hand on the Grexian's wrist. The movement was so unexpected that Takanur froze. "Your muscles are impressive," Jin Su said conversationally. "But I notice you breathe heavily after lifting weights. Do Grexians have efficient cardiovascular systems?" Takanur blinked all three eyes. "What? On Earth, we have animals called cheetahs, incredibly fast, amazing hunters. But they can only run for short distances before exhausting themselves. Humans, though, we're built for endurance." The other Grexians gathered around, uncertain whether this was still bullying or had become something else. Jin Su continued. "We hunted by pursuing prey for hours, sometimes days. We'd follow until the animal collapsed from exhaustion, not because we were stronger or faster, but because we could keep going when others couldn't." Takanur lowered his arm, genuinely curious now. "Human saying can outlast Grexian. I'm saying appearances can be deceiving," Jin Su replied with a slight smile. The tension in the cell shifted. Other inmates, who had been cowering, moved closer to listen. The Grexians exchanged uncertain glances. Later that night, as the lights dimmed for sleep cycle, something unusual happened. One of the younger Grexians approached Jin Su's bench. "Human," he said quietly. "I am Gartok. What you said about endurance is true." Jin Su sat up. "Would you like me to show you tomorrow?" Gartok nodded, then quickly returned to his group before Takanor noticed. As Jin Su lay back down, he smiled in the darkness. The pecking order was already beginning to shift, not through violence or intimidation, but through something far more powerful: curiosity. The next morning, when the food bell rang, something unprecedented happened. Gartok grabbed an extra portion, and when Takanor wasn't looking, slipped it to Jin Su. "For endurance," Gartok whispered. Jin Su accepted the food with a nod of thanks. Around them, other inmates watched this small act of defiance with growing interest. The human hadn't fought back, hadn't shown aggression. Yet somehow he was changing the dynamics of Cell Block 7. Takanor noticed the extra food in Jin Su's hands and stormed over. "Where you get that?" Jin Su met his gaze steadily. "A friend shared it with me." The word friend hung in the air like a challenge. Takanor looked around, trying to identify the traitor, but found only blank stares. For the first time since Jin Su's arrival, uncertainty flickered across the Grexian leader's face. The pecking order hadn't just been established, it was being rewritten, and not in the way anyone expected. The tension in Cell Block 7 had been building for days. Takanor couldn't understand why his usual tactics weren't working on the human. Every insult bounced off Jin Su like water off a stone. Every act of intimidation met with calm politeness. It was driving the Grexian leader mad. On the fourth day of Jin Su's imprisonment, Takanor decided to end this game once and for all. During the exercise period, when all inmates were allowed to move freely within the cell, he gathered his 3 lieutenants and surrounded Jin Su. "Human has been too comfortable," Takanor announced loudly, ensuring everyone could hear. "Time to teach respect." Jin Su was in the middle of doing push-ups when the 4 massive Grexians formed a circle around him. He finished his set, then slowly stood up, wiping his hands on his prison uniform. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he asked, his voice steady. Takanor's upper right arm shot out, aiming to grab Jin Su's shoulder, but something unexpected happened. Jin Su didn't flinch or cower. Instead, he twisted his body with liquid grace, and Takanor's hand closed on empty air. The movement was so smooth, so effortless, that for a moment no one realized what had happened. Takanor stared at his empty hand in confusion. "I would prefer not to engage in physical confrontation," Jin Su said quietly. "But I should warn you about something." The other inmates had stopped their activities to watch. Even the guards outside the cell seemed interested in this development. "Warn us?" Takanor sneered, though there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "Human thinks can warn Grexian." Jin Su nodded slowly. "Have you ever heard of persistence hunting?" The Grexians exchanged puzzled looks. "What nonsense is this?" demanded one of the lieutenants. "On Earth, before we had advanced weapons, humans hunt a large prey by simply following them. We would track an animal for hours, sometimes days. We couldn't outrun them in short bursts, couldn't overpower them with strength, but we could outlast them." Takanor laughed, the sound echoing off the cell walls. "Human tells fairy tales now. It's biology," Jin Su continued calmly. "Humans can regulate body temperature through sweating. We can carry water and food. We can maintain a steady pace almost indefinitely. Most prey animals can sprint faster than us, but they overheat quickly. They have to stop to rest. We don't." "So," Takanor growled, growing impatient with this lecture. "So," Jin Su said, meeting the Grexian's gaze, "humans evolved as endurance predators. We're not the strongest or the fastest, but we can keep going long after others collapse from exhaustion. It's not a threat, Takanor. It's simply what we are." A murmur ran through the watching inmates. Some of them had heard of humans before, but never this particular fact. Takanor's face darkened. "Human thinks this matters here. This is not hunting ground. This is prison. Here, strength rules." He lunged forward, all 4 arms reaching for Jin Su. Again, the human moved with that same fluid grace, stepping aside at the last moment. Takanor stumbled forward, his momentum carrying him past his target. Strength is impressive, Jin Su acknowledged, but it burns energy quickly. The question is, how long can you maintain it? Frustrated, Taknur spun around and charged again. This time, his lieutenants joined in, creating a wall of gray flesh and muscle. Jin Su dropped low and rolled between their legs, coming up behind them. "I don't want to fight you," Jin Su repeated. "But if you force me to, you should know that humans have another trait. We're patient. We can wait for the right moment, conserve our energy, and strike when our opponent is tired." The Grexians were breathing heavily now, their massive bodies not designed for quick, repeated movements. Sweat, or whatever equivalent their species produced, was beginning to form on their gray skin. "Stand still and fight," Taknur roared. "That would be foolish," Jin Su replied. "Why fight strength against strength when I can simply wait for you to tire yourself out?" For 10 more minutes, the dance continued. The Grexians charged, grabbed, and swung. Jin Su dodged, ducked, and weaved. He never attacked, never retaliated, just kept moving with an economy of motion that seemed to require minimal effort. Finally, one of the lieutenants dropped to his knees, chest heaving. "Can't. Keep going," he gasped. Taknur looked at his exhausted subordinate in disbelief. They had been trying for less than 15 minutes, and already one of them was spent. The human, meanwhile, wasn't even breathing hard. "This is what I was trying to explain," Jin Su said softly. "Humans might look weak compared to many species, but we have our own strengths. Endurance is one of them." The gathered inmates whispered among themselves. They had never seen the Grexians fail at physical intimidation before. More importantly, they had never seen anyone handle them with such calm efficiency. Taknur stood there, his 4 arms hanging at his sides, uncertain what to do next. The human hadn't fought back, hadn't shown aggression, yet had somehow made the Grexians look foolish. "This isn't over," Taknur growled, but the threat lacked its usual force. As the Grexians retreated to their corner, Jin Su resumed his push-ups as if nothing had happened. Around him, the other inmates looked at him with new respect. The human had issued his warning, and everyone had heard it loud and clear. The morning after the confrontation, Taknur sat brooding in his corner. His pride was wounded, and he needed to restore his dominance. When Jin Su entered the common area for breakfast, Taknur stood up. "Human," he bellowed. "You talk about endurance. Now prove it." The entire cell block fell silent. Jin Su paused, holding his breakfast tray, and turned to face the Grexian leader. "What do you propose?" Jin Su asked calmly. Taknur grinned, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Contest of strength. You and me." Jin Su shook his head slightly. "A direct strength contest wouldn't be fair. You outweigh me by at least 3 times. But if you're interested in testing endurance, name it," Taknur challenged. Jin Su set down his tray and walked to the wall. "Something simple. We'll do wall sits. Back against the wall, legs bent at 90 degrees, like sitting in an invisible chair. Whoever holds the position longest wins." Several inmates laughed. It sounded too easy. Taknur's face showed confusion, then confidence. "This is child's game," he scoffed. "Then you should have no problem winning," Jin Su replied with a slight smile. Word spread quickly through the detention center. Even inmates from other cell blocks pressed against the force fields to watch. The guards, supposedly neutral, seemed equally interested. Taknur and Jin Su took positions against opposite walls. Other Grexians lined up beside their leader, wanting to prove their superiority. Even Gartok joined, though he positioned himself slightly apart from the others. "Begin," shouted Pip, the furry alien who had appointed himself as referee. At first, it seemed laughably easy. The Grexians' massive muscles held them steady while Jin Su looked small and fragile in comparison. Taknur smirked, certain of his victory. 5 minutes passed, 10 minutes. the smirk beg, and to fade from Takenor's face as his legs started to tremble slightly. Feeling tired, Jin-Soo asked conversationally. He hadn't moved an inch, his breathing still regular. Never, Takenor growled, but sweat was now visibly running down his gray skin. At 15 minutes, the first Grexian collapsed, his legs giving out completely. He crawled away, ashamed. At 20 minutes, another fell, then another. The remaining Grexians were shaking violently, their faces contorted with effort. Jin-Soo began to recite poetry. 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. Shut up, Takenor gasped, his voice strained. But Jin-Soo continued, his voice steady and calm. At 30 minutes, only Takenor and Gartok remained of the Grexians. Gartok's legs finally buckled, and he slid down the wall. Just you and me now, Takenor panted. His entire body was trembling, muscles screaming in protest. Jin-Soo nodded. You're strong, Takenor. Incredibly strong. But strength has limits. Endurance is about efficiency, about using only what you need. 45 minutes. Takenor's face was purple with effort. His forearms pressed against the wall for support, which technically disqualified him, but no one mentioned it. How? Takenor gasped. How still going? Human muscles are different, Jin-Soo explained, still maintaining perfect form. We have more slow-twitch muscle fibers. They're not as powerful for quick bursts, but they can work for hours without tiring. We also distribute lactic acid more efficiently. The scientific explanation was lost on most of the aliens, but the visual demonstration was clear. The mighty Grexian leader was failing while the seemingly weak human remained steady. At the 1-hour mark, Takenor's legs finally gave out. He crashed to the floor with a sound like a falling boulder. The cell block erupted in shocked whispers. Jin-Soo held the position for another 10 minutes, just to make his point, then smoothly stood up. He walked over to Takenor, who was still sitting on the floor, staring at his trembling legs in disbelief. Need help up? Jin-Soo offered his hand. Takenor looked at the offered hand, then at Jin-Soo's face. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he reached up with one of his 4 hands and accepted the help. As Jin-Soo pulled the massive alien to his feet, the entire dynamic of Cell Block 7 shifted. The other inmates looked at Jin-Soo with newfound respect, and at the Grexians with less fear. You win, Takenor admitted. The words clearly difficult for him. Human is stronger than appears. Jin-Soo shook his head. Not stronger, just different. Every species has its advantages. Yours is raw power. Ours is endurance. Neither is better or worse. They're just different tools for survival. Gartok approached them, still rubbing his sore legs. Will you teach us this endurance? Other inmates echoed the request. Even some of Takenor's loyal followers looked interested. Jin-Soo glanced at Takenor, seeking permission. The Grexian leader hesitated, then gave a slight nod. Of course, Jin-Soo said. But first, let's all have breakfast. Even endurance athletes need to eat. As the inmates shared the morning meal, this time with no stealing or bullying, the guards outside exchanged glances. They had never seen Cell Block 7 so peaceful. The human had achieved with patience and demonstration what force and punishment never could. The story of the wall sit challenge spread throughout the detention. Grexians always think strength is everything. You show us different way. That afternoon, a guard called Jin-Soo's name. Human prisoner, report to processing. As Jin-Soo walked to the cell entrance, something unprecedented happened. The inmates lined up to say goodbye. Pip hugged his leg. Gartok offered a warrior's salute. Even the other Grexians nodded respectfully. Takenor stepped forward last. Jin-Soo of Earth, he said formally, you have taught us much. If you ever need allies, Grexians will remember. Thank you, Takenor. Keep practicing the exercises. Remember, true strength comes in many forms. As Jin Su reached the force field, Taknor called out one more time. "Wait, will you come back?" To visit. Jin Su turned, surprised by the request. "You want me to come back to prison?" "Not as prisoner. As teacher, as..." Taknor struggled with the word. "Friend." The guards exchanged disbelieving looks. The most feared inmate in cell block 7 was asking someone to return voluntarily. "I'll see what I can arrange," Jin Su promised. In the processing center, a flustered official apologized profusely. "Terrible mistake. Your repairs actually saved the station. We're clearing your record and offering compensation. I have a different request," Jin Su said. "I'd like permission to implement an educational program in the detention center. Physical training and conflict resolution." The official blinked rapidly. "You want to help the inmates?" After what happened. Especially after what happened. These beings made mistakes, yes. But they can learn, change. I've seen it happen in just a few days. 3 months later, Jin Su returned to the detention center, this time with official credentials as an instructor. Cell Block 7 had maintained its peaceful atmosphere. Taknor had even started mediating disputes in other blocks. "Welcome back, teacher," Taknor greeted him, using a term of respect in Grexian culture. As Jin Su began his first official class, he reflected on how a simple misunderstanding had led to something meaningful. He'd entered this place as a victim of bureaucracy and left as a friend. Now he returned as a bridge between species, teaching not just endurance of the body, but endurance of the spirit. The inmates gathered around, eager to learn. Humans might not be the strongest or fastest species in the galaxy, but they had something equally valuable: the ability to adapt, to understand, to turn enemies into allies. Today, Jin Su announced to his diverse class, "We'll learn about the most important muscle of all, the one between your ears. Mental endurance is what truly changes lives." As the lesson began, the guards noticed something remarkable. For the first time in the detention center's history, inmates from different species were laughing together, helping each other, building something positive from their shared confinement. The human hadn't just survived the galactic jail, he had transformed it. And sometimes that's the most human thing of all. Not the ability to outlast others physically, but the capacity to change hearts and minds with patience, understanding, and unwavering endurance of spirit. Word spread throughout the galaxy of the human who had tamed the most violent cell block through demonstration rather than domination. It became a lesson taught in diplomatic academies. True strength isn't always about what you can break, but what you can build. And in Cell Block 7, former bullies and victims continued to exercise together, living proof that even in the darkest places, positive change was possible. It just required the right kind of endurance.